All right, my friends, I have 8 big stories for today. And as I was preparing this, I was thinking, if I didn't see that these were all from reputable sources, I would think that Gerdes is a conspiracy theorist. I mean, it's just remarkable. So here's the first story I want to start with, and it's Erdogan, whose Turkish forces occupy 8,835 square kilometers of Syria in an area encompassing 1,000 settlements and 1.4 million Syrians, calls on Russia, Iran, and Syria to protect Syria's territorial integrity. Protect Syria's territorial integrity. What are they talking about? Like, Erdogan is actually, Turkish forces are in Syria. And you can see this in this Wikipedia article, right? The Turkish armed forces and its ally, the Syrian National Army, have occupied northern areas of northern Syria since August 2016 during the Syrian civil war, right? So I guess that's, but it's not even just that, and that there's areas that are being occupied, but it's even weirder. Al Arabia News, and again, is tying these people together. And if I was just saying it, you wouldn't believe me, but here we are. We will defend an urgent and permanent peace in Syria. Israel is the most concrete threat to regional and global peace, Erdogan said in an interview with the Turkish media. It is essential that who? Russia, Iran, and Syria take more effective measures against the situation, which poses the greatest threat to Syria's territorial integrity. Right, Russia, Iran, and Syria all bundled together. Like, if I just said it, you wouldn't believe me, but this is Al Arabia News. Wow. Okay. Now, let's lead to the second story. Breaking: Washington Post obtained newly uncovered Hamas documents revealing a 9/11 style attack on Israeli skyscrapers, railway bombings, and secret pleas to Iran for funds to destroy Israel. Here's the translation. If this tower is destroyed in one way or another, an unprecedented crisis will occur for the enemy, similar to the crisis of the World Trade Center towers in New York. Like, they were all conspiring on this. So it was at least Hamas and Iran, and it looks like Hezbollah is part of that as well, although they weren't quite invited to the party full-throatedly. But here's the Institute for the Study of War. So the New York Times reported that Hamas asked for Iranian and Lebanese Hezbollah participation in the October 7 attacks in July 2023, underscoring the coordination between Hamas and the wider axis of resistance before the operation. This meeting demonstrates that Iran had strategic foreknowledge of October 7th attacks, but it remains unclear if Iran or Hezbollah had tactical knowledge of the attacks' timing. Now, it wasn't supposed to be on July 23 of 2023. It was actually supposed to happen in 2022. And there's like more to the story. Now, who knew about it? I'm pretty sure that the Russians actually knew about it, although I can't prove that. So I'm going to say this is just on me. I haven't been able to prove sources yet that have said that the Russians knew this was going to happen on this particular time when it happened. But they're all tied together. It's bizarre to watch. Okay. Next big story. Anne Applebaum has published an article in The Atlantic that she says herself is different than the most recent articles about Ukraine. Ukraine's military production, in her opinion, is one of the components for a Ukrainian victory. I've been beating these drums now for the last few weeks. I think that's spot on. Ukraine is going to, one of the factors that's going to make it win is its own homegrown rockets, missiles, drones, etc., that they're going to be able to take to the fight to the enemy, because Biden simply won't allow them to do it. But when they have that, it's going to be formidable. It'll shift the center of gravity in the fight. Western leaders spend far too much time worrying about red lines and toying with the idea of land for peace. That's what they've been talking about for the last 2 years. If they want to, bring the war to an end, let's just give them that land and let it be done. However, as Ms. Applebaum explains, these suggestions mean nothing if Russia doesn't agree to them, or if they agree to them and just don't stand by their obligations. And Russia has no intentions to stop the war. It's often said that dictatorial regimes will strengthen if Ukraine loses, and that's, I think, a fair point. But actually, this axis of evil already keeps getting stronger during this war. That's true. Like, Iran, Russia, Syria, China to a lesser degree, North Korea have really united in a significant way. And I was thinking about this because I just finished Mearsheimer's book about how again, Mearsheimer's the realist school of thought, how nations think, and just finished his book. And so I've been thinking about this, and there's a balance of power that's been common for some time, but these guys coming together is going to create another balance of power on the opposite side to oppose them in a more significant way than what we've seen before. Russia's cooperation with Iran and North Korea is blooming, and there are reports that Russia is building a drone factory in China. Ms. Applebaum concludes with, quote, "The democratic world remains wealthier and more dynamic than the autocratic world. To stay that way, Ukraine and its Western allies have to persuade Russia to stop fighting." That's by grinding Russia down. Okay, next, air defense base capable of shooting down Russian missiles will be opened in Poland. This was announced by Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski on Radio Rebellion. The base is located in the village of Redzikwo, about 100 kilometers from Gdansk. It's expected to house SM-3 missiles from the ground segment of the U.S. Aegis Ashore missile defense system, as well as radar. Construction of the base began in 2016 under an agreement with the United States and NATO. The project has long been criticized by Moscow. Of course, Moscow doesn't want it there. Russia has put all sorts of pressure on the U.S. to ensure that the project is not fully realized and that these elements of NATO's missile defense shield are not present in Poland. They don't want that there. Polish radio notes that the genesis of the project is directed against the missile threat from Iran. Like tying these together, I'm amazed. Will be used exclusively for defense against the Iranian threat. If you look at a map, we're looking at the northern side of Poland, and the threat is because of Iran down here. What's going on? And then if you look at the missiles, the RIM-161 Standard Missile SM-3 is a ship-based surface-to-air missile used by the United States Navy to intercept short and intermediate range ballistic missiles. The thing that Ukraine is having the hardest time with is intercepting ballistic missiles. They can intercept cruise missiles, but they have a hard time with ballistic missiles for one reason or another. And then here are just some images of the missile itself and what it looks like. And yeah, so that's where they are with that. Just thought that was really interesting. Now, breaking. EU to impose first sanctions on Iran over missile transfer to Russia. Reuters has learned that the decisions on sanctions will be made on Monday, October 14th. Today is Sunday, October 13th. So we'll be looking to see what happens there. Okay, Lukashenko claims that hotheads in the West are cooling off in response to Russia's updated nuclear doctrine. He suggests that if they hadn't heard these signals, they would have bombed Russia with long-range missiles. So they're claiming a victory lap for deterring the West. Isn't that interesting? Now, do Ukraine's partners still somehow believe that the Russian and North Korean economies now dependent on constantly rising weapons and munitions production, that there's any intentions to stop at Ukraine? So this is just a question from Spravdi, but they said this: every week is a new record, doubling every 6 months the weapons production. I don't know that that number is accurate, but I do know that the trend of that they're getting plenty of weapons and they're not going to run out of weapons, especially because of the connections between Iran and North Korea with Russia. They're not running out of weapons, and that's very sad to say, but I think that that's a fair story at this point. I'm not going to vouch for every week a new record or doubling every 6 months, but they're not running out. They're just not, because they're getting their supply. North Korea's business model now is supplying Russia for their war in Ukraine. Now let's turn some attention to what Russian propagandists are saying on TV. It must be said that the main task today is to conserve human resources. This is the main point today because trained people bring victory. Good so far. Over these 2 years, we have learned that it is possible to recruit a large number of people and use them all up completely in just 2 or 3 weeks. Wow, that's quite an admission, and that's essentially what has happened in the meat grinder on the front lines. And then here we see this in Solyov Live, Belarusian propagandist is saying that Belarus and Russia will restore Ukraine and return it to the common bosom of Slavs, as they consider it originally theirs. Russia fears a successful, independent European Ukraine, and that's why our war is existential. I think there's something very fair about that, that the it's not that there are Nazis in Ukraine or something like that. It's not NATO moving, but the comparison, the difference between, it's like the difference between North and South Korea. As Ukraine becomes more European, you'll see a sharper and sharper contrast between Ukraine and Russia. Okay. Last little bit, stand up for Ukraine, I thought was a good sign. And then, isn't that beautiful? Like, that's just quite a picture. All right, my friends, that's all that I have for you today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.